Welcome to Worlds Collide, a wrestling card podcast for wrestling fans by wrestling fans, featuring Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com.
This is like a stock market.
And Zhan Morning from Wrestling with Cards on YouTube. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, I'm just posing the question. Join them as they navigate the world of wrestling cards, helping you build a bigger and better collection and making some money along the way. What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors, back again, and today it's a top three. Here we go.
Top three.
Bing, 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 bing. Insert cool 1, 2, 3 kid sound that I always like to talk about here.
1, 2, 3.
All right, today we're going to talk about this. This is going to be a little bit controversial. The top 3 most impactful wrestling card releases of all time. I didn't say the most expensive. I didn't say the most popular. The most impactful. So I will give my criteria for this, and then I want to hear Tony's opinion on this. The first thing is popularity. These are the cards you see all the time. These are the cards you hear people talk about all the time, whether it's good or bad, whether people are making a joke or a meme about it, whether it is a really high-selling card. What is the most popular? And then the second thing is markets, and that has to do with what are you seeing bought all the time, whether it's for $1 or whether it's for $125 or $600 or $1,000 or whatever that rock card sold for. You know, talking about Prism there. So that's kind of my criteria, is the markets, like, and not the top or bottom, but kind of what's going all the time. And then what is the community and people posting and talking about and showing. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on your criteria for your top 3.
Well, that's a pretty good criteria right there, I guess. I mean, again, this is going to probably piss some people off. I'm sure.
We have a tendency to do that.
Yeah, but again, they're just our opinions. And if you know, I love to hear. It's almost like trying to ask people, like, what's your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers and stuff like that. You know, everybody has their different criteria, I guess, or that's what makes everybody fans of somebody. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good criteria to have, is popularity and market. But I'm wishy-washy on my selections. I can go either way. I think all of mine are kind of like, I could probably strip any one of them from my top 3 and insert something else that would probably just be as equally as important to me, I guess. So it's interesting what we're going to talk about here.
I think let's start off with where we went different directions. Okay. Because two of our selections look like they're pretty much the same thing, and one of them is different. So let's start with what's different. I went with the 1991 Classic WWF and the 1991 Impel. And here's my thought process behind that. You've got 2 iconic wrestling card sets. And what I mean by iconic is you can't go to a card shop or a flea market or a wrestling event and not find a card or a pack of 1991 WCW Impel.
You're welcome.
There you go. Yeah, keeping those pressers hot. On the flip side, you've got the 91 Classic, which everybody chases for the Undertaker rookie. And they love the images. And to this day, I'm still seeing people on Wrestling Card Wednesday sharing 1991 Classic, 1991 Impel. People are still going out. I mean, it's got to be important if you and Paul are covering it on your monthly recap on the Impel set. Yeah. You know, it's so that these may not be the most valuable cards, and a lot of people don't like these cards, but the fact that they're constantly in our eyes on our social feeds, they're constantly being bought and sold on eBay, whether it's for $1, whether it's for $100, whether it's graded, whether it's raw, constant transactions on these things. So a couple, you know, like I said, the Undertaker card's very important in this set. And other than that, I think people just love the design and the images of some of these things. So what are your thoughts on those, if you have any?
I agree. I mean, I was going to consider the Impel set as well. The Stomp
collection, talking about pumping your own product.
Well, you know, hey, I got to do it. Got to flex, baby. Got to flex. I was going to, because it is popular. It's everywhere. I mean, you find it in card shops, you find it in flea markets, you find it at car washes, you find it at. I think there's probably a section in a daycare center somewhere where there's just stuff laying around. Probably. I don't know. I mean, it's everywhere, and yet it's a bright, colorful design that's been mimicked over the years by a lot of indie card set companies that are putting out stuff. People gravitate towards that. It usually is also somebody's first introduction to wrestling cards, is an Impel set, because it is so bright and it's so plentiful out there. That's why I thought it was hilarious during the pandemic era that so many people were trying to really pump that release as something that you got to get this. I got a 9, I got a 10. Well, you got like 50 billion, cards out there, from this set. There's going to be a lot of 9s and 10s out there. I was going to put on my list just because of the popularity. It fit that mark, but the market, I don't know. I thought it was too much of a go-to for me. So I wasn't trying to be like, oh, well, you're popular. I don't want to pick popularity. I'm picking this.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I can flip-flop on my list. The difference that I had from yours is I picked the 2014 Topps Chrome, just because it's become such a hugely popular and very valuable a card set because of the autographs and the super refractors and all those kind of
Golds.
things.
I think that's the first one that people say that have the golds in them, and that we know the history on that already.
Sure, and I could easily just strip that out and say, you know what, just throw Wrestling All Stars in here. I could do that. I could easily do that because we all know the importance of that set and what it means to the hobby from a vintage standpoint, from just how important it is to our hobby to have that particular series, the 82, 83 All Stars in our hobby. Everybody has every sport and genre has their 86 Fleer, their 52 Tops. I mean, we have that, and that's kind of where our benchmark is. So I didn't purposely not put that on the list because I was like, well, it's talked about too much. Well, but it's impactful, it's important, it's there, it exists. So again, I could flop out my 2014 set and put that in there just as easily. I really could. But I'm sticking with my 2014 Topps Chrome for me.
Yeah, and I didn't put All Stars in this. Spoiler: All Stars didn't make the list. I'm not being biased because it's my favorite wrestling card set of all time, bar none. But when I look at social feeds, I see more Impel and 91 Classic than I do All Stars. I see more than that than Topps Chrome. But I think the 14 Topps Chrome is what's really jump-started more ultra-modern cards. Because of the parallels, because of the golds, because of the cracked ice, all that. Oh, I think it's, what is it, Atomic? I think Topps calls it Atomic Refractor. Yeah. But I think the 2014 set is impactful for the fact that it kicked off ultra-modern and what we're seeing now with Prism and Select and all these other brands. So I think that's a great choice. But, again, it's funny we both mentioned the All-Stars. And, again, it's my favorite set ever. But I just don't see as much of that as I do some of these other things that we're going to talk about today.
And I'm the other way because I guess my social media feeds is inundated with Wrestling All Stars, and several other vintage type stuff too. But Wrestling All Stars is undeniable. It is what it is, like that. And so its consistency in high dollar cards is you can't refute that, really. Right. It is what it. So its popularity and its market share is a no-brainer. But again, I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be the same old with like, oh, it's got to be Wrestling All Stars, and it just is what it is, I guess. So
let's move on to the next one that we both agree on, and that's 1985 Topps. And you may be saying, oh, well, that's not Hulk Hogan's True Rookie, or maybe it is, or blah blah blah. Yeah. But we're talking about impactful releases, and we're talking about cards that we see transact all the time. That Hogan #1 card with the yellow back, and I think the blue card is like card 16.
Number 16, yeah.
Yeah, both of those are they sell all the time.
All the time.
And then you can start digging into the weeds through the Topps brand when you're looking at OPC and Scanlons, and they're the same kind of cards, but a little bit more of a chase. But Topps is what started that. Topps is the first WWF official wrestling card release. So, I mean, we would maybe not have wrestling cards if it wasn't kicked off with this set. Now, we had them prior to that, I understand. But from a mass, like, retail perspective, where you can just go to your store and buy wrestling cards, if it wasn't for 85 Topps, we may not have what we have today.
It's what also got me in the cards at the time for into wrestling cards. I've told the story before, but briefly, I worked at a liquor store that was also a deli, and we had a little gum rack section, it's like that. And I remember Frank Charles Murray III. He was the manager of the store, and big in collecting baseball cards. And when the guy came in to to offer them like, hey, is there anything else you want to carry? Blah blah. It was all handled through our candy supplier, so our gums and candy bars, things like that. That's where he ordered the cards from, and so he's like, yeah, let's get got the sales sheet for GPK, and on the backside of it was an advertisement for WWF cards. Top. So we ordered some, and that was my first exposure to wrestling cards, and I really enjoyed it. So it's significant to that to me. I almost, for my list again, I could flip flop so many things from this list. I almost said, I think I'm going to put 87 tops in there because of it's such.
That was my first experience.
The design itself became something that a lot more collectors got involved in because of 87 tops, and another design that has been mimicked over the years from indie cards even got redone by Topps itself in their heritage set.
Right.
So it's a significant card set, but it doesn't have that same market value, pop, because the Hogan slate has a Bret Hart in there, but it doesn't have the same thing as the Hogan card slate. So that's why I went with the 85 Topps as well.
Yeah, I think we pretty much can move on from that. We touched on it here, like, exactly what I said was what your personal experience was. It was a lot of people's first opportunity to get official WWF cards. So let's move on to the last one. And this is kind of a you could lump both of these in together. It's the 2022 season.
Yep. So, I call it a season.
Yeah, and I agree. So we're talking AEW, we're talking Prism, and I'm going to throw in the inundation of all the indie card sets that we have.
Yep.
And this is the reason I put this kind of stuff on my list is because this is the biggest boom we've ever had in wrestling cards. We had a brand new brand being AEW and having Upper Deck, which really hadn't put out wrestling cards up until that point. They did, but it was like, the Hogan one-off or something like that. They didn't put out a full brand. So here we have a newer company with a brand new brand of cards. And we saw the explosion with that. We saw new people coming in that are AEW fans that hate WWE. Oh, they have cards now. I can go after my favorite person. I can collect the sets. Then we had Prism. We all know about that. We won't spend a lot of time about that. And we've seen what it's done even into the 2023 season. And then the indie card, not only interest, but the companies putting out the cards seem to really kick off. And people finally recognizing these things as, oh, yeah, these are trading cards. These aren't just gimmicks that they're selling at the merchandise stand. So, and the reason some of these may be valuable, some of them maybe not. I mean, we've seen, I think of all the things, the AEW Upper Deck box and those base cards and those products may have even gone down more than Prism from just like, we could talk about Upper Deck and how they've handled the license and whatever, but that's not the point. The point is this season of 2022 and all the products released in it were some of the most impactful of all time because of all of the new people we got into wrestling cards and all of the new ways of collecting that people are starting to discover. So what are your thoughts on the 2022 season?
I agree. That's why I added to my list too. I called the 2022 season for all those reasons. It became a significant year across just not only because of Panini and Upper Deck's licenses, and like you said, the indie stuff too. Indie sets have been being put out for some years prior to that, but for some reason in 2022, everybody jumped on the bandwagon of producing card sets. Everything from what we call bootleg card sets like that, because people are just so passionate about creating designs and putting things out there. Some incredible work done. But a lot of these independent places realize, hey, creating a card set is a very cheap and effective way for us to market our product and drive interest, not only from our local area, but people all over the country, sometimes over the world, are like, I collect those cards and I want to have those because they're indie cards. So, and it also in 2022 became to me the season that all these card sets really opened the floodgates of prospecting and speculating that we'd never seen before in the hobby. We had never really seen people like, ooh, I'm going to start getting some Braun Breaker stuff. When we get some MJF stuff, because these are people I believe in that are the future of the business that I need to go out and invest in early now while it's still relatively cheap. And we've seen those kind of cards. They ain't cheap anymore now already within 1 year's time frame. So the whole year has opened the door for, I would call it, 2022, the prospecting year, because that's kind of what it is. And so all those sets, all those manufacturers for that year have become hugely popular and have hugely affected the market.
Yeah, and we've seen like all this, there's ways of people collecting rainbows now, and there's different ways that people have got into it, and I could tell based on a lot of the feedback, like people were saying, and I love this. It wasn't a negative. Like some people might see this and be like, "Oh, you're an idiot. You should know this." But there might be somebody that says, "Why is this one of one? How is that different than the base card? Explain this to me. Why it's more important?" Stuff like that. So, and I think that that's the whole reason we do this podcast, is to help people with their collecting journey, more information that they can get. And I love seeing that, especially on the AEW front. Again, we're not going to talk about Prism, but with AEW, there was just this passion, and I think there still is. And I think Upper Decks kind of dropped the ball, to be honest, on their product line, and for whatever reason. But their fan base around AEW is so rabid, and they were wanting to get into these cards, and they were wanting to dig deep and learn into sets and parallels and chase, and why is this base card the same as this pyro, but the pyro looks different? What is grading? What is a break? All of these things kind of percolated in 2022, which, mind you, the rest of the world in the hobby going downhill. Wrestling exploding. You gotta love it.
Yeah, I mean, 2020 without this 2022 season and these properties, you don't see $126,000 rock card.
Yeah.
You don't see that ceiling being broken by a modern card like that. It's become such a great year in that sense, again, for the prospecting. It's just it's moved the market into an area that we never thought was going to happen for wrestling cards. So more eyeballs, bigger market, more collectors, higher values, all because of popularity. So these things all tie into each other. And we're in 2023 now. We're 4 months, almost 5 months into 2023, and which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah,
and,
no kidding.
and we're seeing all the benefits. We're seeing all of the rewards of what the 2022 year laid down for us, I think, as a hobby. Wrestling cards are in a very good place right now, despite any bickerings and back and forth and what camps you're in kind of thing. The general hobby itself is in a very good place.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have the difference of opinions, these lists. I'm as we're going to probably talk, and hopefully when we close out here, I'm interested in hearing other people's lists. Like, what would you think is the most impactful wrestling card sets of all time for you, and why? But we're in that place now in the hobby where it's such a great thing, and there's so much passion from collectors. I mean, there's some discussions going on Twitter from certain groups, private groups that are so passionate about the indie scene, and these guys know every little nuance about the indie scene and their roles in that sector of the hobby. A niche within the niche is so important, but there's so much passion there. It's like that. We didn't have this prior really to 2022 to the level it is right now, and it continues to keep growing. And I think that's why the whole year of 2022 is so important. And I think it's going to go down. And while we have the big monumental sale of the rock card from 2023, 2022 is going to be the year that I think people 20 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, are going to be like, that's the year that really took wrestling cards to the next level.
Yep. Can't say any more to that. 100% agree on that. We'll go ahead and close out the show. Before we do, again, let us know what your top three are. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? If you disagree, let us know why. If you agree, let us know why. Maybe there's another important point we missed on something that needs to be brought up. You can tag us on social media or leave a comment if you're watching the video version of this. Tony, let everybody know where they can get a hold of you and leave these comments for their top three.
WrestlingTradingCards.com, folks. Over 20 years of doing what we do, providing checklist information to help you better understand the hobby, what you have, and what you're looking for. Check us out there. All of our social media tags, our handles are on the bottom of every single page of the website. Are you online at all?
I am, but before I do that, I want to also quickly plug the WTC YouTube channel. Continues to grow, continues to get better content, continues to get more faces that, I think sometimes the social media wrestling community is a little insulated, but there are a ton of wrestling collectors out there that are just maybe not quite interacting with the rest of us all the time, or maybe they're only on certain platforms. So some of these faces are popping up on the WTC YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out. And what we just talked about, laying the information out for collectors for these new sets that are a jumping point off of 2022. All that's on WTC's YouTube channel. So make sure to check that out, subscribe. Speaking of YouTube, you can check out my YouTube channel, Wrestling with Cards, Wrestling with Cards, the podcast, and of course at Zhan Morning on all social platforms. Thank you guys for listening. Again, let us know what your top 3 are, and please subscribe wherever you're listening to this. Tell a friend, spread the word, not only about wrestling cards, but about this show, about the Card Foundation, about any other wrestling card content that's out there to help continue to grow this hobby. That's the whole reason we do it. But until next time, we've got to base one quote on the 2022 wrestling card season. But I'm going to let Tony introduce that to you.
How can I sum up 2022 other, like maybe we can create a phrase for it of some kind.
Yeah,
maybe.
Probably.
Something to do with wrestling cards. I got it. Wrestling cards rule.
That's it. We'll see you.